You hear the word demon, and I bet a certain image pops right into your head. Horns, a pitchfork maybe. But that picture, that's actually the end result of thousands of years of evolution. The idea of the demon has this long, incredibly complex, and honestly, surprising history that's changed right alongside humanity itself.
So, that really gets us to the big question, doesn't it? Where does our modern idea of the demon actually come from? Well, to answer that, we've got to go way, way back. Back to the very beginning, to the deepest, oldest parts of what it means to be human. So, where does a story like this even begin? It starts with the first stage in the demon's evolution, something we can call externalization. And that's just a fancy word for a very human habit, taking the fears we feel inside and giving them a face, a form, out there in the world.
I mean, just try to imagine it. Long before any organized religion, before names like Satan or Beelzebub ever existed, our ancestors were living in a world of constant, immediate threats. So what we might call proto-demonology wasn't really about good versus evil. It was a coping mechanism. It was a way to take the terrifying, random, chaotic parts of the world, give them a face, and try to make some sense of it all.
And we're not talking about abstract anxieties here. These were the real, raw ingredients for what would eventually become supernatural evil. The crushing darkness of night didn't just feel empty. It felt like it was watching you. A sudden, wasting sickness wasn't a random biological event. It felt like an attack. Death wasn't just an end. The dead could stick around, and they might not be friendly. These fears were literally the clay from which the very first demons were shaped.
Okay, so as humanity starts building cities, creating civilizations, these vague, shapeless fears, well, they start to get organized. And this brings us to the next major phase, the creation of a kind of supernatural catalog.
You know, the invention of writing was a total game changer. All of a sudden, we could name our fears. We could write them down. Early societies in places like Mesopotamia and Egypt, they didn't just hide from demons. They studied them. They made detailed lists, they wrote down their habits, and they developed specific step-by-step rituals to fight them. This wasn't just storytelling, this was a practical guide to spiritual self-defense.
And just look at these examples from Mesopotamia. They didn't have one generic evil spirit. Oh no, they had specialists. You had Lamashtu, who was the living embodiment of infant mortality, a terrifyingly real part of life back then. Then there was Pazuzu, who personified the destructive winds that could bring famine and plague. By giving these horrible things a name and a job description, chaos became a known enemy. And if you know your enemy, you can fight it.
And this led to some really fascinating strategies, like this principle of apotropaic magic. It sounds kind of backwards, right? But the idea was basically to fight fire with fire. You would actually use an amulet with the face of the horrifying demon Pazuzu on it, precisely because his image was considered so terrifying, it was powerful enough to scare away other nasty things, like Lamashtu.
And this wasn't just happening in Mesopotamia. Over in Egypt, the entire universe was believed to be locked in a nightly battle for survival. The sun god Ra had to journey through the underworld and defeat Apep, this giant serpent of pure chaos, just to make sure the sun could rise the next morning. So the demon here wasn't just some minor pest, it was the embodiment of cosmic annihilation, and it had to be defeated again and again, every single day.
Okay, so this leads us to a really major shift in thinking. With the rise of monotheism, all these scattered, specialized demons and evil spirits start to merge. They begin to coalesce into a single ultimate opponent, the great cosmic adversary.
Right, so here's the crucial thing you have to understand. The figure we now call Satan, he didn't start out as the king of hell, not even close. In early Hebrew texts, like the Book of Job, Ha-Satan wasn't a proper name. It was a job title. It meant the adversary or the accuser. This being was a member of God's divine court, like a heavenly prosecutor, whose job was to test the faith of humans, all under God's authority. He wasn't a rebel, he was an employee.
And you can literally watch this evolution happen right in the biblical text. In the earlier book, 2 Samuel, it says that God's anger is what incites King David to do something wrong. But then you look at the later retelling of the same story in 1 Chronicles, and the author has made a change. Now it says Satan stood up and incited David. This is a huge theological edit, and it solves a massive problem. If God is all good, where does evil come from? Well, by blaming temptation on an independent adversary, you take that weight off of God's shoulders.
And with that theological puzzle neatly solved, the transformation was pretty much complete. The divine functionary, the heavenly prosecutor, had evolved into the ultimate cosmic rebel. The figure of Satan was now the main antagonist in a grand spiritual drama, the leader of a kingdom of darkness standing in total opposition to the kingdom of light.
But hang on, the story isn't over, not by a long shot. The final, and maybe the most dramatic pivot in this entire story brings the battle from the cosmos right into the human mind. This is the stage of internalization.
And then the Enlightenment happened. The Age of Reason. It was like an intellectual earthquake. This new focus on logic, on observation, on natural laws, it just fundamentally challenged the supernatural worldview that had reigned for thousands of years. Reason began to systematically pull apart the very framework that external demons were built on.
And what this did was it completely shifted the battlefield. You see, the old theological view said the source of evil was an external agent, some demon or devil out there, which meant the fight was spiritual warfare. But the new psychological view, it located evil inside of us, in our own internal processes, our biases, our traumas, our emotional struggles. The battle had moved from out there to in here.
You can actually watch this reclassification happen step by step. Something like a seizure, once blamed on demonic torment, was first re-examined by doctors who offered diagnoses like epilepsy. And then, eventually, psychology came along and offered a whole new framework, reinterpreting the demon as a powerful metaphor for our internal states, for trauma, for repressed memories, for the fragmented parts of our own minds.
So what does a demon look like in the 21st century? Well, psychology offers us plenty of candidates. Take something called the availability heuristic. Think of it like a little demon in your brain's code, a glitch in your thinking that constantly tricks you. It's the reason why, after seeing a scary news report about a shark attack, you suddenly get scared of swimming, even though you know, logically, that you're way more likely to get in a car accident. Your brain is being fooled by the information that's most available, leading you to bad judgments. Just like the ancient demons personified unseen forces, this is an unseen force inside our own heads that leads us astray.
And that brings us to our final thought. We've chased this idea from a personification of natural chaos to a cosmic supervillain and finally to a metaphor for our own inner conflicts. So the question that's left is, after all these thousands of years, what is the demon today? Is it still an external foe? Is it a purely internal struggle? Or has it become this timeless, powerful metaphor for a fundamental battle that all of us, in some way, have to fight?